Okay, this video is called How the West Betrayed Czechoslovakia to Hitler, the Munich Agreement 1938. If you do want a link to this video, it will be in the description below. Listen, guys, I hear you. We like to shout out our fellow creators and support them. Let us react to this video.
How the West gave Czechoslovakia to the Nazis, September 30th, 1938. October 28th, 1918. Czechoslovakia declared its independence following the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in World War I. Within the new state structure was a mix of ethnic groups and territories, all with different historical, political, and economic traditions. Most of the territory was inhabited by Czechs and Slovaks, but more than 20% of the population were ethnic Germans, roughly 3 million people, the majority of which resided in the Sudetenland, a strip of...
I sigh because this is like a talking point at the moment of the Ukraine-Russian thing. Like, well, there's a number of them in this region that speak Russian or German, you know. Listen, Americans, hear me out, okay? There's a very large portion of America that speak English, okay? Now, I'm not saying Britain should come over there, okay? I'm not saying that, all right? But if you're going down that logical route, I'm just saying.
Land bordering Germany and Austria. Many of the Sudeten Germans heavily opposed the Czechoslovak government and its policies and wanted to join Austria or Germany. Although the constitution of the new country called for the equality of all citizens, the political leaders had obvious preferences towards Czech and Slovak nationalism, which saw violence and heavy anti-German sentiment against the Sudeten Germans. Ultimately, the government resorted to violence to quell civil conflicts between the two regions and proceeded to fully integrate the region by September 10, 1919. In the years that followed, some progress was made to integrate the Sudeten Germans and other minorities in Czechoslovakia, but they remained largely
Look at that guy's hat. You know he's German, right?
underrepresented in the government and the army. This was further exacerbated by the Great Depression, which hit the highly industrialized Sudeten Germans more than most. By 1936, 60% of the unemployed in Czechoslovakia were German. Meanwhile, in Germany, the National Socialist Party had come into power. A key pillar of Hitler's foreign policy was to unite all German-speaking people into one collective Reich. As such, Hitler created plans to reunite Germany with his own homeland, Austria, as well as taking control of the Sudetenland. In 1933, Konrad Henlein founded the Sudeten German Party, or SDP, in Czechoslovakia. The SDP soon captured 2/3 of the votes in ethnic German districts, and by 1935 was the second largest political party in the country.
Hang on a minute, second largest political party in the country of Czechoslovakia? How many Sudeten Germans were there?
Whether or not the Sudeten German Party was initially established as a branch of the Nazi Party, but what is clear is that in the years that followed, the Nazis became a strong supporter and financier of the party. Encouraged by the support, the German minority living in the Sudetenland began demanding its own autonomy from Czechoslovakia. They claimed that they were being oppressed by the national government. In 1938, emboldened by the Anschluss, Nazi Germany's annexation of Austria, Hitler met with Henlein and established a paramilitary organization consisting of ethnic German citizens of Czechoslovakia. They were housed, trained, and equipped by the German army to conduct terrorist operations against the Czechs.
Sounds familiar.
Although a surprise invasion was rejected by the Nazis, Hitler continued to make antagonizing speeches, demanding that the Sudetenland was united with Germany. War now seemed imminent. After the horrors of World War I, however, neither France nor Britain were prepared to defend Czechoslovakia and wanted to avoid all conflict at all cost. The Prime Minister of Britain, Neville Chamberlain, was especially opposed to any conflict. His foreign policy was centered on appeasement, which involved giving military, political, and territorial concessions to Germany in order to prevent war. This was in part due to Chamberlain's belief that Britain was still unprepared for a war. Indeed, a report by British chiefs of staff said that Britain would have been unable to forcibly prevent Hitler from taking Czechoslovakia. Chamberlain also resented giving in to these conditions. According to French Prime Minister Daladier, it made Chamberlain's blood boil to see Germany getting away with it time after time and increasing her domination over free peoples. Appeasement at the time, however, seemed like the lesser of two evils. In April 1938, Chamberlain met with Daladier to discuss the ever-escalating situation. Chamberlain saw no way to prevent Hitler from destroying Czechoslovakia if he chose, and argued that Prague should make territorial concessions to Germany. Both leaders believed peace could only be maintained if the Sudetenland was handed over to the Nazis. In mid-September, Chamberlain traveled to Germany and met with the Führer. Hitler agreed not to take military action without any further discussion. Chamberlain proposed that all areas of Czechoslovakia that were more than 50% German should be turned over. The Czechoslovakians, however, were not consulted, but the government was forced to accept the proposal anyway on September 21st. The next day, Chamberlain flew again to Germany to meet Hitler. To his dismay, Hitler had increased his demands. In addition to occupying the Sudetenland, Hitler now wanted all Czechoslovakians to leave the area by September 28th, which was just 1 week away. The Czechoslovakian government, the British cabinet, and the French all rejected the idea, and the sides began to mobilize for an imminent war. In one final last-ditch attempt to avoid a conflict, a desperate Chamberlain convened a four-power conference to settle the dispute. On September 29, 1938, Chamberlain, Hitler, Daladier, and the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini met in Munich.
Is this Mussolini? What the hell?
Hitler was angry.
He's not recognizable.
Felt humiliated that he was now at the mercy of the three powers arbitration. He refused to allow any Czech diplomats into the meeting.
There's no way this is Mussolini. He don't look right.
A deal was reached in less than a day, and the four leaders signed the so-called Munich Agreement.
Oh no, don't sign!
The agreement allowed the German army to occupy
No.
the Sudetenland, and an international commission would decide on the future of all other disputed areas, including the areas that Hungary claimed as their own. Chamberlain and Hitler also signed a paper which declared their desires to resolve their differences through diplomacy rather than war. Once again, the Czechoslovakians
peace in
were
our
not
time. We did it,
consulted.
boys.
France and
Peace.
Britain told Czechoslovakia that they could resist Germany alone or submit to the agreement. Under pressure, they chose to submit. On October 5th, the president of Czechoslovakia, Edvard Beneš, resigned from his position after realizing that his country was facing collapse. Chamberlain shortly returned to Britain after the agreement had been signed. He was famously seen
Are they cheering or are they booing him?
waving the declaration in the air while announcing, "Peace for our time." This was, of course, highly ironic considering the events that followed shortly.
Hang on, peace in our time. What?
Time. In the air while announcing, "Peace for our time."
Peace for our time. Peace for our time. I've been saying it wrong all along, guys. Why have you guys not been correcting me? I thought it was peace in our time. Oh my God, guys, you have not been correcting me. It's a common misconception. Peace for our time was declared by the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain in the 30th September 1938 in remarks to London concerning the Munich Agreement. He said for. Wow. The problem is now, whenever I say peace for our time in my YouTube videos, everyone's going to go, he's saying it wrong.
The Sudetenland was also where Czechoslovakia had built expansive defensive border fortifications. Without those resources and defenses, the country was extremely vulnerable to a German invasion and total domination. Indeed, only 1 month after the Munich Agreement came into fruition came the First Vienna Award. This saw largely Slovak areas in the south of Czechoslovakia go to Hungary. Nazi Germany and Italy had long sought a non-violent way to support Hungary's territorial claims, returning areas that it had lost after World War I. With Czechoslovakia on its knees, the country had no choice but to give up the land. Similarly, a part of the country in the northeast was occupied and annexed by Poland under the pretense of protecting ethnic Poles. On March 14, 1939, Czechoslovakia lost more land as Slovakia announced complete independence. This came after Hitler convened with a newly formed autonomous Slovak government and pushed for the unanimous agreement to separate from Czechoslovakia. The following day, another region, Carpatho-Ukraine, announced its separation from the country.
Ukraine?
Fearing complete annihilation, the Czech Prime Minister asked Hitler to protect what remained of the nation. Hitler obliged, creating the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia.
One thing you don't see in HOI4 is this protectorate, do you? It just shows it's given to Germany. It's not recreated as a puppet state. I know a few mods have tried to keep it as a puppet state, but it's really strange, that one, isn't it? You'd think they'd include that.
In the end, Hitler would betray all those he had dealt with, and by September 1944, all of Hungary, Poland, and Slovakia were occupied by the German army. At the time, the Munich Agreement was celebrated in Europe for preventing a war, but in effect had marked the end of Czechoslovakia. The agreement emboldened Hitler's and Chamberlain's policy of appeasement, but was ultimately discredited when Nazi Germany invaded Poland in 1939, triggering the Second World War. The Munich Agreement is now remembered in history as a byword for the futility of appeasing aggressive totalitarian states.
And let's all remember Mussolini that looks like the guy from Hitman. Whoa, that explains a lot. Holy shit, now we know. Mind blown. So the ongoing theory, I mean, this is a separate video for future, but the theory behind this is that Neville Chamberlain knew that a conflict was coming, and he knew that Hitler would continue to make demands. So the idea was that every time he appeased Hitler, he was buying more time because, one, mentally, Britain wasn't ready for World War II because they still had memories of World War I, and two, Britain hadn't rearmed, so wasn't ready for a conflict militarily or psychologically. But that's a video for another day. I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye! This video, technically, is part 2.